and she leads work on financial innovation and inclusion in Colombia. She has a wealth of experience in organizations across the financial sector, in particular looking at the topics of payment systems, development policies, and securities market regulation and supervision. We then head over to India, where we'll hear from Venkat Jayanti, who is Managing Director and CEO at the India Post Payment Bank. He's over 20 years experience working in leading banking institutions on business strategy, product development, and digital financial services, with a deep understanding of technology as an enabler. Venkat is a key industry spokesperson in India and is closely engaged with the government and regulatory institutions in this very fast evolving industry. Then we'll hear from Darren Ware from our Knowledge Partner. He's the Vice President for Government Engagement in Latin America and the Caribbean at Mastercard. In this role, he engages with public sector leaders to support governments on their digital transformation efforts. He brings expertise in developing growth strategies using fact-based analysis and understanding of enterprise and payment technology markets. Then we will hear from Farid Osmanov, who is the Executive Director at the Central Bank of the Republic of Azerbaijan. In his current role, his strategic focus is to establish a cashless economy and to accelerate the creation of a digital ecosystem in Azerbaijan. And during his career to date, he has helped the adoption of information and payment systems covering ever-changing business needs and improving efficiency of business processes. And then last, but by no means least, we will hear from Patricia Ellen, who is the State Secretary of Economic Development, Science and Technology in the state of Sao Paulo in Brazil. In 2016, Patricia's leadership on digital innovation, education, and economic development in government was recognized at the World Economic Forum. She has led digital innovation projects across government and is co-founder of a movement that seeks to promote social engagement to build a more humane and sustainable country. So I'm sure you agree, we really do have an amazing international expert panel with us here today. Please take this opportunity to get the most out of them as we can by sending us in your questions. But without further ado, I'm going to invite Anna Maria to give us some opening comments. Over to you, Anna.
Good morning to everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here joining this panel. So, financial landscape is facing the most disruptive transformation ever. We have new activities, new players, and new collaborative strategies between them and traditional institutions. And above all, we have an evolved customer. There's no doubt that as this fintech wave continues its rapid growth, financial services and payments in particular become cheaper, faster, and more accessible. But together with these new opportunities, we also see significant challenges. So as we shift to a digital world, governments need to assure not only that savings are safe, but also that there are no upcoming arbitrage and that emerging risks are also being managed. But more importantly, governments need to assure individuals are better banked and better served. And to do so, there's a demand to shift the regulatory approach to empower citizens so as that they are able to make their own choices widely. And see just how a couple of years ago, it was the financial institution who defined the means through which customer could make purchases. But now it's actually customer who really needs to decide which payment initiation party to pick, just to give an example. Following this objective, in Colombia, we have designed a public policy strategy to support the fintech journey and accelerate financial inclusion. One of the strategic chapters of this agenda has to do with the reshape of the payment system, opening access to non-banking acquirers and bringing new payment services providers to scale electronic payment acceptance in the country. We aim to speed electronic payment usage from 20 to 50% of adult population by 2025. In addition, and seeking ways to respond to the economic effects of COVID-19, we managed to digitize government-to-person payment programs for the first time in the country. Together with banks and fintech players, we were able to financially include almost 1.2 million vulnerable households through the Ingreso Solidario Emergency G2P program in 2020. The digital uptake brought by the pandemic in our country sets even more opportunities to take advantage of the fintech movement, but we also need to ensure no one is left behind. Colombian government has been working together with the private sector to reach a 70% internet access in the country by 2022. And in the meanwhile, we as regulators have been promoting the provision of financial services through in-person channels such as banking agents, but supporting those channels with new technologies and fintech capabilities to reach far rural areas. So we have big challenges in meeting the fast changing expectations of citizens, but we are on track to make sure that infrastructure and foundations for fintech rollout are in place so that we can have a more efficient and inclusive financial system for everyone. So thank you again for this invitation, and happy to take the following questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anna. I'm sure we're going to get loads of questions, but a really nice way to start this off, because I think you set the scene well by talking about the benefits of adopting some of these fintech solutions and giving cheaper, faster, more access to people, but also some of those risks and the challenges. It's a fast moving environment, lots of different expectations from the citizen about what can and can't be achieved. As you say, there's real infrastructure challenges still for different governments around the world getting the foundations in place. And I think something really important there that we'll probably come back to in the questions is making sure that people don't get left behind. You know, it's not everybody can access yet some of these new solutions. And also that theme about COVID, I think that will come back, and how COVID has forced a sort of step change in this area as well. So thank you so much, really great in terms of setting the scene in the opening remarks. I'm now going to head over to India and ask Venkat to give us his opening thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Vanita. So in the Indian context, fintech is playing a very major role, I must say, in the last 5 years. I mean, thanks to the support and the infrastructure that was created with the government, where the mobile plus the digital identity has really accelerated the pace of financial inclusion. So the last decade, the number of people who have been aligned with the banking system has been phenomenal. Almost 80% of the country's population has been included, financially included, by having an account, where government is able to disburse government-to-person subsidies, payments. All of that is getting routed through these bank accounts. And the advent of unified, payment interface, India had been ahead in the payments curve as compared to, other peers in the world and emerging economies, where a unified payment interface had actually increased the adoption towards payment, and also addressed a lot of user experience based aspects. And more importantly, it has seen wider participation of non-banks. Probably I think this is first in the world, where you would have seen a lot of non-banks coming into the play, and where the likes of Google and Amazon has actually taken the entire payment transaction to the next level. I mean, one of the questions that have been rising in the recent past is that, how good or how bad is the big tech players coming and joining the banking ecosystem. I must say that fintech has actually played a very important role in playing around the gaps between banks and the customer, whether it is consumer experience or whether it is productization. I think a lot of gaps have got filled. So personally, I feel that it's very good for the banking, because what used to happen is a lot of technology companies never had any kind of accountability when working with banks. So you need some technology solution, you take it, and then it is up to the bank as to how they leverage this technology. Thereby the customer experience was never given any kind of importance. With fintech coming into picture, they were not only willing to provide technology at a very lower cost, but also a better consumer experience. I think that's what has made the difference. Especially, I have been involved with a lot of fintechs in the last 5 years of my working with banks. And I must say that these people have done yeoman service in terms of bringing the best for the consumers, and in terms of sharing on a revenue sharing basis, so that economically and commercially it doesn't really hurt a banking institution so much. So that's the one aspect. And coming to the big tech participation, I must say that I'm the culprit of getting Google into this play, because when I was working with Equita Small Finance Bank, we thought that why can't we market financial services, because why payments alone? Why can't we have banking products marketed through Google Pay platform? And that is one thing which has really taken up. And in the recent past, even regulator has also been looking at whether it is good or bad for the banking system. I think one sensitivity towards this whole thing is that whether the banking system would be disrupted so much so that whatever regulations and whatever mechanism that is getting governed will also get disrupted. While some of these apprehensions are relevant or valid, but however, from a consumer standpoint, I think it is very important that we take this banking products across multiple channels. And more importantly, today, the banking products have been commoditized, right? I mean, it is up to the customer, from which channel he wants to avail these services. I think as long as you leave the choice to the customer, it's absolutely safe. And with regard to the privacy and the security of information, I think for those things, there are enough norms in place. And if this can be taken care of, possibly the scale up should not be a challenge. Coming to the use of technology, especially for financial inclusion, as I said earlier, there's been a lot of account opening that happened, but has it really solved the problem of financial inclusion? Partly yes, partly no, because still there's a long way to go. One good thing is that now at least the customers have got bank accounts, there is a trail, and basis that it can be extended to other services like credit and insurance. These are the two most important factors. And more importantly, in the Indian context, what we've seen is half of the population still living in rural areas. The adoption towards payments is slightly lower. I think to solve that problem, probably credit is one real critical factor. First we creditize, and then it automatically gets digitized. So everybody has some of the other consumption needs. So that consumption need, if it is creditized, if it can be given some kind of a credit facility, then it automatically gets digitized. So that way what happens is the credit facility will fuel more and more digitization of these last mile customers and last mile end users. And that can help. And similarly, even in case of insurance also, possibly, we need to come up with some customized products where instead of bunching the premium payment at one shot, it can be probably made in a small subscription amounts, so that even insurance product can also be covered. The other important aspect is how technology like feature phones can be better utilized, because most of these customers may not afford smartphones, and network is also a bigger challenge. So in the light of that, possibly feature phone based solutions could well serve the purpose and bring them on to the digital financial services more and more. While USSD had been tried, technology has been tried earlier in India, but it did not take off that much because of language barriers, mainly because of language barriers, and also because of the commercial elements surrounding the sessions of USSD, so on and so forth. So technology revolution, disruption, especially in the financial inclusion space, is very much required. And I hope in time to come, this will be addressed by these fintechs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venkat. I mean, great way to build on from what Anna Maria said, because you echoed some of her, the themes that she meant about consumer choice, the importance of choice for customers as well. But I think great to hear how much work has been going on in India, how much progress has been made on this. Really interesting, and I'm sure we'll come back. We've already had a question, I think, about that, on this sense of the kind of non-traditional players, the big disruptors coming into the market. Interesting to hear that you see that as a positive thing, but also I think you flagged some of the risks that people might be worried about around privacy and security and use of their data, those kind of issues. I'm sure we'll come back to those as well. And then, as you mentioned, even though progress has been made, there's still a way to go. There are still people who aren't included. There's still people who don't have access, who maybe don't have the devices that they need for some of these solutions. So really loads of food for thought there. Thank you so much, Venkat. I'm now going to ask Darren to give us his thoughts.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation to this distinguished panel. At Mastercard, our work with government has two major parts: financial inclusion of underbanked individuals and digital inclusion of small and medium businesses. In 2015, we made a pledge to financially include 500 million people. We got there in 2020, and given the pandemic, we looked around and said, let's do that again. So we added another 500 million to our objective for 2025, which would bring us to 1 billion people included in the financial system around the world. Not only people for that goal in 2025, but also businesses. We added another goal, which is 50 million businesses, small and medium businesses around the world, as well as 25 million women-led businesses. So we're functioning on both of these levels, at the financial inclusion of individuals as well as digital inclusion of businesses. During the pandemic, more than 40 million people became financially included in Latin America. And this was very clearly driven by many of the government subsidies going to underbanked individuals. As Ana Maria said previously, we participated in the Ingreso Solidario program in Colombia, which is a government subsidy program where we worked with a Colombian fintech who is critical to the delivery of those subsidies, named Movi. Another thing that was critical about the success of that program was there was a companion card as well as a digital solution, because so many of the new consumers wanted to have both options. They needed education on what these services were, how to use them, and also enabling them to continue to be users and participants in the financial system with access to services like those, as well as ongoing subsidies. In Argentina, Banco Nación Argentina uses a prepaid solution for multiple subsidies, everything from a food card to tourism incentives to COVID emergency assistance. What the government clearly figured out was that they could use the same platform for multiple programs and also control how the programs work. In Chile, we had a different experience with Caja Los Héroes, which manages some of the pensions for the country. The difference in that program was we needed to make sure that we had incentives to drive adoption, because the pensioners had not used a solution like that before. So by giving them, for example, a discount on their light bill, they adopted it more and became more used to using that particular solution. So all of these are different situations, different country, different fintech, where we had to solve a different problem with the governments. My team still laughs at me when I tell them we go ears first when we listen to governments. We don't go product first. We try to find solutions to the challenges that the governments are facing when trying to solve the problems for their citizens. These solutions are very clearly and very often framed by a regulatory environment, which is different in each country. That regulatory context can open doors, especially, for example, for digital onboarding, as an example, where we all understand that AML or KYC requirements are key, but they can also coexist with efficient new account creation. These well-designed regulatory frameworks can help drive inclusion. We've seen that in some of the frameworks, like as well, also mentioned by Ana Maria. Fintech's driving inclusion overall. The small businesses during the pandemic also, what we did with small business focus, we had a program, still have a program called Digital Doors, or in Latin America, Digital Allies, which is basically a coalition for helping to bring small and medium businesses online because of the increased importance of online, so they can continue to thrive. In terms of individual programs, the other one that's important to mention is our investment in a program called Start Path Empodera in Colombia as well, actually, which is a program to support and develop female entrepreneurs. It started in Colombia with the support of US aid. We also have now that program expanding to Peru. What it is basically a focus on women entrepreneurs to join a business accelerator, provide them access to skill building, mentorship, technical assistance, and networking. We've done 2 cohorts so far that were already oversubscribed in terms of the number of female entrepreneurs that wanted to participate. And we're very happy to be now adding Peru. As another example, we just signed an MOU with the Secretariat of the Economy in Mexico, also to support both individuals as well as women-led businesses, to work closely with them and design key initiatives in that very important sector for economic recovery. These are just a few examples of how we're engaging with governments around the world as they drive financial inclusion of both individuals as well as digital inclusion of small and medium businesses, especially during pandemic recovery. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Darren. It's good to get the kind of private sector point of view to see how you are engaging. Really nice to have those real examples of the different countries, the different governments that you are engaging with. And something I think that we'll pick up on in the discussion afterwards, there is lots of talk about different countries building back after the pandemic and building back better. So interesting that you in particular are focused on two areas, I think, if I understood you correctly. So one is kind of inclusion of women, so making sure that this is in particular outreach to women and women entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, and small businesses as well. And I think people might have questions, I think, about why that's so important as we build back after the pandemic. So it'd be interesting to pick up on some of those, and really impressive targets that you've got there in terms of how many people you want to see included and businesses as well. Thanks so much, Darren. We are now going to go over to Azerbaijan, and I'm going to ask Farid to give us his comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I'm very much honored to be here as a panelist and provide some insights on fintech development trends, as current state of the industry in Azerbaijan, and created opportunities by the Central Bank of Azerbaijan. As far as I know, the almost all central banks have a mandate to maintain the safety, security, integrity, and interoperability of the payment systems by tailoring the regulation and infrastructure for expanding financial inclusion. And today, the most financial services and products of fintechs are related to the payment services and are going through a rich period of innovation. In general, fintech has shown its potential to close all the gaps in delivery of financial services to households and firms in emerging markets and developing countries. We know that, and payment systems and payment services are attracting the major attention of fintechs, as the financial inclusion starts with the payments. Even after PSD2, the account-based payment services became the major streams and priorities in fintech strategies, establishing account information service providers and payment initiation service providers. And meanwhile, innovative payments startups and attracting plenty of venture capitals, as our colleagues say, the technology giants such as Apple and Google are making a serious entry into the industries, while banks and card schemes are scrambling with to defend their market positions. And even COVID-19 pandemic has profoundly affected financial systems across the world, including the provision of digital financial services and the functioning of fintech market. And this digital transition toward digital payments brings many opportunities even in Azerbaijan, including the potential to make payments faster, secured, contactless, and remotely. Nonetheless, the cash remains the most frequently used payment method in Azerbaijan, and percentage of the non-cash transaction in card payments is almost 30% right now. And we feel a great boost in payment statistics as well in 2021. The volume of the non-cash transaction domestic card payments increased 61%. I mean, contactless transaction rocketed 7 times in Azerbaijan compared to corresponding indicators of 2020. And we see this rise in mobile banking and internet banking as well, as the mobile banking raises 3 times, as well as internet banking statistics increased to 57–60%. And we always cooperate with the leading global payment organizations. I'd like to talk about the cooperation with Mastercard and develop digital ecosystem in the country. Over the last years, the central bank has implemented a number of successful initiatives, projects with global leaders, as well as Mastercard and Visa. Within the frame of cooperation, we have launched the transit project tokenization services, as well as fulfilled the Cashless Azerbaijan program with Mastercard to establish digital economy and digital payments. Also in 2021, signed a digital country partnership encapsulating a number of strategic initiatives, which will be fulfilled in the 21–25 years period. And regarding the challenges, today the central bank worked very tight to establish the regulatory framework for fintech companies, embracing sandbox regime open banking and other aspects. In spite of having different fragmental regulative documentations in payment systems and services, there should be the rule of law which will support the digital payments and services to widen the doors to support the fintechs in the market. So therefore, we have developed a project of law on payments and service provider and payment systems, and work very tight with the government to expect to come on forth by the end of this year. The law encapsulates the main aspects derived from PSD2, aiming to provide the wide access to consumers, fintechs, payment initiation providers, and account information providers. And even regarding the digitalization, the central bank being the major service providers to the market, we focus on the fintechs as well. The main rationale behind this initiative is to provide the digital services for banks as well as the fintechs to increase the financial inclusion. Within the last years, we've established innovative platforms like the fast payment and instant payment system, and the first blockchain initiative in the country, the digital identity, we say the bank ID, as well as the electronic KYC platform to run the smooth the KYC and AML procedures in banking and provide this kind of services to the market. And today we provide the services, the payment services to fintech and banking to fulfill all those payments between the 5-10 seconds, and as well as using these facilities, everyone can open the bank account across the country. And ultimately, we understand pretty well that public-private partnership, of course, can influence all state bodies and entities, helping us to tackle the institutional problems in the financial inclusion. Without proper regulated framework, you can't establish the sustainable development of digital payment services. The rule of law should support the fintechs, but not limit their role. So thank you very much for your attention, and ready to address the questions.
Thank you so much, Farid. It's really good to get the perspective of a central bank in the conversation as well. Really great to hear kind of the enthusiasm that you have for encouraging other people and facilitating new players into this environment and into the sector, but that you did stress there, which I think again will be an issue, and I know our panel members have mentioned this, the importance of getting the regulation right. And you started off by saying, you know, you absolutely have to make sure that whatever is done is secure and safe, and that the payment system remains a secure one. So it'll be interesting to pick up on that in the conversation as well. And you introduced one thing there, which I think different countries are taking a different approach on this. I know it's something in the UK we don't yet have, is the idea of a digital ID, and how much that might be required as a foundation for expanding kind of fintech solutions going forward. So thank you so much. And also similar to what Venkat said, in India, lots of progress been made, but still a way to go. There's still a lot of people using cash as their primary way of operating. Thank you so much. And now last, but absolutely not least, I'm going to ask Patricia to give us her opening thoughts.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you. And it was also a pleasure to listen to everyone and learn about the initiatives that are happening all over the world. In our case here in the state of São Paulo, today I am in charge of the Secretary for Economic Development, Science and Technology, and we integrated the policies for entrepreneurship, jobs, and also economic development in a way that we can see the full cycle and follow the citizens and help them in financial inclusion in a more holistic way. In the case of Brazil, Brazil is in the first position in Latin America in fintechs and in the financial system. We have a situation that's a little bit different from other countries, especially developing economies, because access is not the issue. We have one of the highest percentages of banked population in the world. And as a comparison, in the case of fintechs, for instance, in the case of São Paulo City is in the 4th position globally as one of the cities in the world with the highest concentration of fintechs, being behind only behind San Francisco, London, and New York as an example, but ahead of all the developed cities around the world. So we have access. as fintechs and startups ecosystem. For instance, fintechs is the system and the area where we have the highest concentration of startups and unicorns in the state of São Paulo and in Brazil. We have startups like Nubank, Guia Bolso, Me Poupe, and Acesso Bank that gain prizes all over the world, grew quite quickly, and are expanding also not only in financial access, but also payments, credit, microcredit. And we have an advanced financial system that actually also as a curiosity that became quite effective because of the hyperinflation periods that we used to face many decades ago, that unfortunately we have inflation again, but the financial system developed because of high inflation. We still have challenges in cybersecurity and even physical security, which is a challenge for us in many ways. But today we are framing and approaching financial inclusion in the Secretary with a lens in which we see a framework of 3 steps. So access, financial health, and financial autonomy independence. And in our case, access, as I said, it's not an issue, but financial health is an issue. So we are investing in financial education, and financial autonomy is also an issue, especially because of high interest rates and the type of access, especially that poorer people have. And that's what we are trying to change. With the pandemics, we also had additional challenges. Gender is a big issue. So entrepreneurship based on necessity rather than opportunity grew quite quite rapidly because of the pandemics. So the inequalities that we already faced grew throughout the pandemics, and women and especially low-income people and specific races were more impacted by the pandemics than others. So this is the issue that we are trying to fix right now in our state. How we are doing that? We are working on microcredit. So we have a Banco do Povo, a bank that's with our secretary. Through this bank, we offer microcredit opportunities to poor people. So we have interest rates that range from 0 to 0.7%. And we do that not to compete with banks, but to cover some segments that are not being covered by the banks today and by the fintechs. We also create a prepaid card in partnership with Mastercards and Acesso, which is a fintech, to make sure that we create an easier access to poorer people and that access will not be a challenge. We also created an entrepreneurship program. And within this entrepreneurship program, we create the biggest financial education plan that we've ever had here. And together with the microcredit and any type of transfer programs that we have, we always offer the financial education as a mean and as an incentive for them to have access to the funds. So you cannot have access to the funds, microcredit funds or income transfer programs if you don't have access to the financial education plans. This is the condition that we created to incentivize the financial education. And to finalize, unfortunately, today we had to go back to the beginning. We are now with the biggest income transfer program that the state of São Paulo has ever created. So we now are covering more than 1 million people in this income transfer program. And we do that for entrepreneurs and also to workers that are unemployed. And together with that, we added the financial education planning and the access. Our goal is to help the people that today are not having access to funds. After they have access to basic necessities, they move to the microcredit plans. And of course, our goal is always that they become independent. Mm-hmm. And we are adding to that now vocational training and also programs for jobs. So we had the opportunity to do that because we integrated all these secretaries together and we covered the full cycle of each one of the citizens that we are covering today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Patricia. Really good to get that slightly different perspective as well. As you say, Brazil, then different context really. So access not being the main issue, the issues, lots of fintech startups, high concentration of fintechs, most people banked, global leader in some ways in this actually. but issues definitely more around the financial health, financial autonomy, and I think other people in other countries would recognize as well the issues around cybersecurity that you mentioned as well. And then picking up on what others, especially Darren, have said around the inequalities and the importance when you look at financial inclusion of focusing on some groups in particular. And we certainly saw, I think, around the world how COVID impacted disproportionately on women and on some ethnic minority groups. So really good to frame the kind of inclusion, fintech inclusion conversation around some of those groups as well. And then finally, what you stressed there, fintech solutions aren't standalone solutions. They won't work on their own unless you have the education piece alongside. So I think that's a really important and a nice way to end those opening presentations. So thank you to all our panel members for those opening remarks and for keeping them so concise as well, which means we have lots of time now to take questions from the audience. We've got a couple coming in already. Please, if you're listening, send in any questions. We have such a great panel here. It would be a shame not to pick their brains in the time that we have them with us. I just want to kick off with one question of my own before we go to the panel. And I want to ask to the questions from the audience. I want to ask each of you, to what extent do you think issues of trust between citizens and the government are a real barrier to the adoption of some of these fintech solutions? And does that play into this sense of some people might prefer to have other players in the market? So it actually, to some extent, having people like the Googles coming in might be a good thing. But do you think there is a problem between trust and people allowing government access to their data? Anna Maria, it's been a long time since we've heard from you. I'm going to come to you for your thoughts on trust and data privacy issues.
Yeah, definitely. I do think that's the main challenge that we are all addressing now in this, not just digital economy, but data-driven economy and the provision of financial services with using data as the biggest and more valuable commodity and asset in general. So we need to, as regulators, as governments, we need to take seriously the consideration in having rules, regulation, policies very adequately addressed so that data is kept safe, is kept private whenever it needs to, and that citizens in general feel confident in the usage of financial services and by providing the acceptance to the usage of that data in a more widely sense. But definitely fintech solutions are very effective to help amplify access and usage of financial services, and we do need to be supportive on that trend to bring efficiency, not just at the back end of the process, but also in the front, in the delivery of those financial services directly to the citizens. Just to give you a little bit of the flavor here in Colombia, what happened recently with the pandemic, the e-commerce grew 50% in 2020, and financial inclusion rate and the access, more like Patricia was saying, we also have a lot of access down here in Colombia. More than 88% of adult population already have access to any sort of banking account or e-wallet. So that's not longer the issue, but we do have a lot of challenge regarding the usage precisely and a healthy usage. And in that perspective, data becomes crucial as a key issue to solve and to handle, to make sure that people can actually take advantage of that account to make purchases, to make transactions, to cover their basic and daily life activities. We as government, I think, believe we can support all that interaction by adequate regulation and by providing also innovation, public innovation capacity. So we have innovation offices, we have a sandbox, regulatory sandbox, which I believe are very, are clever technologies or tools for regulators to learn from the innovations and to accelerate also the adoption from incumbents or traditional financial institutions. And it's a way to also show citizens how innovation is being deployed, and how can we have a better usage of that new technologies and innovation in general.
Thanks, Anna Maria. Venkat, I'm going to come to you. Your thoughts as well on this issue of to what extent trust is a barrier. You were very positive about the other bigger players coming in. Do you think people trust other players more than they trust government? And I want to add on to this. We've had a question from, because I think it's related to this, from Masayo Garcia, who says, how relevant is it to have a proper regulatory framework when designing a financial inclusion strategy? And Anna Maria there mentioned the importance of regulation around trust and keeping so citizens are confident their data is going to be held securely. So your thoughts on kind of trust, regulation, and data issues? Venkat, this is for you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so as far as trust and data privacy are concerned, these are two key elements in any kind of transaction. And as rightly pointed out, that this is not just a problem of one ecosystem, but it's the entire digital ecosystem. And this we have been facing. See, from a customer perspective, what we've seen is that trust is very important as far as saving their own money is concerned. And that plays an important role. But when it comes to usage of the digital channels, especially the younger population, finds it more relevant, and they hardly find difference between what is digital and what is non-digital. I mean, people nowadays are used to do everything digitally. So for younger generation, opening a bank account or going to a bank branch is something very new, something they never know of. So for them, everything is digital, and that is one of the aspects. What we found that when somebody is asked about for completing the full KYC, they don't understand the difference between what is a full KYC and what is a partial KYC. When it comes to the digital identity. So that's one of the key aspects that was observed. But from a regulatory standpoint, what in India has made it very clear is that whatever fintechs, they cannot hold the money. The money has to ultimately reside with a bank, whether it is a prepaid instrument issuers or whether other non-bank players are operating in this ecosystem. Ultimately, the money stays with a regulated entity. So that's been made very clear. I think that's one of the best architecture that we can think of. Because no matter what kind of transactions happen over the top layer that is created by the fintechs, ultimately the money resides with a regulated entity. So that gives a lot of trust to the customer. And at the same time, from an experience standpoint, obviously the channels that get created over this layer will help. And also in terms of storing of customer transaction data, the regulations are very, very stringent in this aspect. But however, the country do not still have data privacy laws, and that's all in the making. I think over a period of time, this should help. And in terms of usage of data, I think as long as it is consent-based and the data is being used for the betterment of the customer's interest, that should be fine. But what we often see is that banks churn this data for various other users. And sometimes it impinges on the security, the privacy of the customer. Where customers get irritated because of the continuous calls. The banks keep calling the customers that why don't you take this loan? Why don't you invest in this investment? Yeah. So on and so forth. I think that is a kind of nuisance which we have seen. I mean, though we have a D&D kind of a control in place, but otherwise it's largely regulated from a trust and privacy standpoint.
Thanks, Venkat. Darren, I'm going to come over to you quickly. If you've got any thoughts to add on the kind of data concerns and how regulation can help with that.
Well, certainly, I think all governments are clearly very concerned about the level of trust that their citizens have in them. The one thing for us, which is I think very important, we have transaction data. For example, we don't have personal data. That's often or usually with the banks, the fintechs. It's not something that we have. And I think that's been very important for us to continue to share and also drive, because that not having that enables us, I think, to have a more of a function as a trusted platform, right? As the regulators are challenged with privacy laws and keeping everyone safe. Clearly, that's something that needs to continue to happen as more and more data is out there, more and more apps on the phone, more and more transaction and personal data everywhere. Governments have to be very careful. We can work with them, and the regulation also needs to be very concerned about all of the different aspects of data privacy, clearly, right?
Thanks, Darren. Farid, you talk quite a lot about regulation in your presentation. You were talking about it in the sense of using regulation to facilitate and support new players into this environment. Is it also something that's that you're thinking about in terms of the security and the data privacy issues?
Yeah, I would say we live in an era of fintech where technology is changing our lives at a rate that every part of society is trying to catch with. And technology creates enormous opportunities and new risks as well. Financial crime and fraud are attracting growing attention in the context of digital transactions. Therefore, the trust aspect is in the middle of all matters, let's say, and very critical aspect which should be addressed in regulation framework. Of course, even when the innovation drives all changes, cybersecurity aspect should be taken into account to keep up with such kind of frauds cases, and therefore regulation should support this privacy matters as well. And I see a big support from public and private partnership, which is also very effective to establish the trust to financial technologies and in financial inclusion.
Thanks, Farid. Patricia, you are obviously working on reaching some of the most vulnerable kind of citizens and communities. Is trust an issue, a big issue when you're working there?
In their case, trust is not an issue. It's more the other way around. They trust a lot, but they need help to use all the payments and the devices and choose and select throughout all these wide range of alternatives. So what we are doing now, even with this example of the transfer program, we created a model in which all the transfer programs are using the most advanced technologies. So we send the money through a link, and they, with a password, can actually withdraw the money in any ATM in the state. So we are created many facilities to incentivize the usage and the access to the transfer programs as well as microcredit. Aside from trust, I believe regulation is important in many ways. Especially, we need to overcome this difference that we have between the approach to regulate traditional banks and fintechs. This needs to be equalized because today there is a huge difference. And together with that, we advanced, for example, applying GDPR rules. So Brazil is following the model that Europe applied. The companies are right now implementing the new rules. Banks in general have more, they have more instruments to implement these rules than many other companies. We are also creating local laws to apply in the issues that Venka mentioned, I believe it was Venka, on how you can use the data and transfer the data from one company to another. So this is very well controlled now. Our challenges are more around three topics. One is blockchain, crypto. I believe that we need to also advance a lot in how to allow the usage and regulate. And there we have an issue with cybersecurity. That's a big issue in Brazil. The issue that I mentioned on how we equalize the difference between traditional banks and fintechs. And the third issue is a curiosity. During the pandemics, gaming grew quite quickly. And we have a new market for payments and transfers that's not regulated at all. That's happening in the gaming industry. You know, for instance, in the world today, we have 2,600,000,000 people that are playing games. And there they are buying products, they are transferring money, And we are not talking about that at all. So I believe this is maybe the third issue that we are right now working on. We will issue a new state law for gaming and how we will be doing that. It's maybe something that we should actually exchange, across countries, because we will all face this challenge in a different way. And of course, I will add a fourth issue that is specifically for Brazil, unfortunately, which is the physical security. We advanced a lot in the last few years with a money transfer program that the federal government incentivized. That's for free, and you can transfer money in the same way in any type of banks, called PIX. And that transfer didn't have a limit. And we had a lot of problems with hijacking and people using that to transfer money with your mobile bank account and your cell phone. And now last week, the government issued a limit to avoid these types of crimes and issues. So this is, I think that's maybe a problem that Brazil faces more often than other countries, but these are maybe the four main challenges that we're facing now.
Thank you. I think all of you, what you said there, it just goes to show how every country has its own challenges, its different challenges that it needs to overcome, and also how fast moving this sector is and this environment is. I'm going to go to questions from the audience. Again, we've got quite a few coming in. So imagine we're all together face to face in a room, and I'm going to do what I would do there. I'm going to take 2 questions at the same time. And then on the panel, you can answer one or both of those questions. So I think building there on something that Patricia said at the end, there's a question from PK Senyo, who has said, how have your countries managed tension between banks and fintechs to scale financial inclusion? Venkat, you talked about this as well. So how has your country managed the tension between banks and fintechs? And then a question from Ian Hall. To what extent is internet connectivity a challenge to fintech solutions, particularly in rural areas? And I imagine that will be different depending on the region that you're talking about. So the tension between banks and fintechs and the infrastructure, the connectivity issues in rural areas. I'm going to change the order a little bit. Venkat, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, there's not real tension. I mean, there's not much of collision as far as banks or fintechs are concerned in a country like India, because as I said earlier, there have been a lot of white spaces or a lot of gaps where fintechs have been working closely with the bank, and also the regulator also made it in such a way that they've created an enabling environment that fintechs do not really poach the banking space. But one important thing I would like bring to the fore is about the ownership of the customer. That is still a big debate. Fintechs say that I own the customer, I manage the experience, and then I can cross-sell other services. I think that is still a debate, because today in the age of super app, so what's happening is it's not just bank owns the customer usage of the account completely, while that may differ. So barring that, there's not much of a tension. In fact, they're working in close coordination in terms of co-creation, collaboration, innovation, and that's one of the real outcome of what has been happening over last half a decade. Be it UPI or be it payment products, and be it digital lending. I think there's been a lot of collaboration between banks and fintechs. The better way to deal with is in terms of creating that enabling environment, which regulation rightly did in our country.
Thanks, Patricia. I'm going to come back to you because I think this builds on some of the things you were saying as well in your last answer. So that tension between banks and the other players, or the connectivity issues in rural areas.
I believe that the fintechs in Brazil, and especially in the state of São Paulo, are so big and so present that the tension changed, and the traditional banks are actually either partnering or acquiring big fintechs and entering in this new market, and also adopting new approaches to create a different type of relationship with their clients, consumers. And the regulation helps a lot. Yesterday, by coincidence, I was talking to a owner of a fintech that gained global prizes, and we were discussing how we can boost our, there is a week that we use every year to raise awareness of financial education and create standards in regulation for banks and fintechs. And we were discussing how we can boost that week and use these moments to promote a dialogue in a more proactive way between fintechs, banks, and also discussing together the challenge that we face. Because this challenge that I mentioned of financial education, I believe that some fintechs started from that perspective, but then they create their own conflicts of interest, because you start with financial education, then you sell products, then you end up, prioritizing your own products. So I believe there is a lot that we need to do to actually take the next step in financial education, financial independence, that creates a need for a union between banks and fintechs, and also taking a more of an ESG approach, if you will, not only making money, but how you can drive real impact, changing and promoting this financial autonomy that we mentioned in the beginning of the discussion. So this is what we are working on right now. And in terms of connectivity, we don't have that issue in the big cities. We have that issue in the rural areas. We are working now in a connectivity plan for the states, and we will also promote a 5G encounter here to take and create 5G test beds. We are very anxious and expecting that the federal government will approve the 5G auction that we should have in the country in the next few weeks. And that will be a huge difference to allow that connectivity will no longer be an issue, especially in the rural areas in our state. But it is an issue today, even in the state of São Paulo, even in one of the most urbanized areas in the world. So imagine in places where you have, a presence of more rural areas, that's a big issue for sure.
Thanks, Patricia. Farid, your thoughts on tensions? Again, you seemed very positive about fintech companies coming in, but there must be some tensions there, some of the tensions that Patricia mentioned there.
Yeah, so I definitely understand that today the role of the fintech is enormous, and today I heard Patricia say that they don't support the only fintechs. They make balance between the banks and fintechs, and today the banks could acquire the fintechs, or even they could cooperate with them. The same situation we face with in our country as well, but nowadays we face the main obstacles, as we said before, as the legal and regulatory framework, which is we are tackling with, and another aspects like the public and private sector, which is I'm again and again would like to mention. According to the ICT infrastructure, even in rural areas, we do have such kind of problem in rural areas as well, and we work very tight with ICT ministries to provide the basic infrastructure services to the rural areas. We have the post bank, which is they do have the offices in every village, and we're trying to provide all these financial services via fintechs to the people and citizens. And regarding the ICT infrastructure, we understand that today the fintechs should be good technically equipped with the new technologies, should be more adapted to change, could explore AIs and big data, blockchain, and as a means of technology. On the other end of spectrum, the adequate ICT infrastructure should be in place to make the digital solution achievable and affordable. Not only financial inclusion, even financial literacy, even the digital literacy should be in place to get all these features provided by the fintechs and for better diffusion, I think.
Thanks. So again, that importance of education as well, I think, really important. Darren, your thoughts as a kind of somebody sitting outside the public sector, your thoughts on the tension maybe between some of these big players and government agencies?
Well, the tension, so there are so many banks that have created their own fintech in-house, right? That's one solution for many banks that want to provide a different solution and app, a different business model to go after the same kind of opportunity that the fintechs themselves are going after. So I think that's one way that there's less tension. I think it also clearly depends on the country, right? The regulatory environment can open the floodgates for creation of fintechs because they have, for example, opened the floodgates for easy digital account creation, right? So if that happens, then competition will happen, will be open, and banks can compete against fintechs, and all players can participate. In the other extreme, if you have a banking or a regulatory environment which is more restricted, doesn't open up for those kinds of opportunities or accounts or competition, then that I can see as being much more competitive, right? Mm. If we have a second, I would love to answer a bit on the internet connectivity question also. Yeah, that sure. One just as the agricultural or the rural classic case of exclusion is very much out there, I think, in terms of that's how we often think of the financially included or excluded. And so many times when we think of inclusion efforts, we think we have to get out there to the parts of the country that are not included, and that there is a barrier in connectivity, whether it's internet connectivity or mobile phone service. That is true in a region like Latin America, where 80% of the population is urbanized already. It is also very clearly an urban problem, right? It's not just about the connectivity outside of the city. It's also about the inclusion that happens in the urban areas. And we are working with mobile service providers, other digital players, to focus on that issue as well from the urban angle, not just from the rural angle. We have to do both, right? And we also have to work with different players to focus on that area.
Thanks, Darren. Anna, I'm going to come for your final thoughts on this, and then I see we've got lots more questions coming in.
Yeah, I believe that the initial tension was at the beginning, but as everyone has been saying, we have a lot more collaboration interactions right now. And still, I believe that traditional players have a little bit of concern regarding possible arbitrage coming into the field as regulation keeps opening and opening to these new activities and players. And obviously governments has to pay attention in not having those arbitrage. Now, regarding connectivity, I kind of believe that obviously it is a big challenge, but at the same time, it's also driving and pushing forward innovation even more. Here in Colombia, we're beginning to see, for example, credit unions and microfinance institutions, which traditionally are being lagged behind in the transformation trend, but they are now bringing new partnerships with fintechs to reach those unreachable customers. And they're being successful in combining technology with a more traditional technologies or supportive methods to guide those unbanked customers and promote digital adoption. And just to give you an example, and picking on again on the experience of Ingreso Solidario, we, as I mentioned earlier, we managed to have 1.2 million people banked, but more impressive than that is the digital usage that we manage. Around 60% of those new customers or households use the money on their wallet to make online purchases. So kind of, we believe that people, because they are sitting in those rural areas, might be frightened to use and adopt digital services, but once they get to use them and have the opportunity to begin to use them, we really see a very impressive digital uptake, and I believe that that's a huge opportunity.
Great, thank you. And actually, that's really nice. That leads me on. I can't believe how fast the time has gone. So this is going to be our last round of questions, and I'm going to have to ask you to keep your answers a bit brief for this time. But Ana Maria, that leads me on very nicely to I'm going to take two questions again from Louis Rodriguez Lemus, who has said, for previously unbanked people who are issued a digital payments product for the first time, do you measure them and make sure that they don't resort back to old behaviors afterwards? So is there a measurement to make sure that this is sustainable for people? And then I'm going to go to a question from Ethar Eltini, I think, who says, in the adoption of blockchain and cryptocurrency for online transactions in particular, how did your countries overcome legislative issues in government transactions and purchasing? So there are some specific issues around kind of blockchain and crypto, and I can definitely see big tensions there between governments. So those two questions, one about, are you measuring the sustainability of some of these solutions? And if you want very quickly to talk about blockchain and crypto, you can do. Again, I'm going to mix up the order and I'm going to go to Farid first.
Yeah, thank you very much. So let's start from the blockchain. So as like the first government institution who has implemented blockchain digital identity solution in the country, we feel like this technology innovation is driving the fintech and financial inclusion matters as well. So we understand the future of the technology is artificial intelligence, big data, machine learning, as well as the blockchain. The blockchain helped us to share the information across the government entities and to keep the safety and integrity and confidentiality of the data. This technology really helped us to manage all these tasks. And we understand this technology could be used in different areas, and some countries are focusing on implementation and piloting central bank digital currencies on the blockchain platform. And some countries even use the hybrid solutions, of course, using the blockchain solutions. In regard with cryptocurrency, right now in Azerbaijan, we don't have any regulated framework in place, but we are smoothly transforming from the follow and learn stage to, let's say, the pilot, test and learn method, let's say. But in terms of cryptocurrency, we understand, okay, it has pretty much risks, and we should manage all these risks with tax ministries and other the government entities, but we more likely focus on the central bank digital currencies. We established a working group, and by the end of this year, we are planning to formalize the conceptual approach of the CBDC over the central bank of Azerbaijan. And in regard with the first half of the question, could you please?
It's just how sustainable. Do you check whether people continue?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. So we once a year we assess all the market, and we drive the different assessment methods, qualitative and quantitative. Let's say the assessment. We do have the different focus groups, age groups, and gender groups. Even nowadays we fulfill such kind of assessment. Even not only city centers, even the rural areas, we would like to understand what kind of negative aspects could let's say that we have, how we could enable the people to use the bank services and fintech services. So we have the tradition of making this once a year, and by the end of each year we are reporting to the chairman.
Thanks very
That's
much.
our experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Farid. Darren, I'm going to come to you probably just for your thoughts on the kind of blockchain side of things. We can answer both, but we're running out of time. So over to you.
Sure. Well, I think the first response is central bank digital currencies. Those conversations are happening in so many governments right now. It has to happen on a technology level as well as on a regulatory level. They can't happen. One can't go in front of the other without the other happening. And certainly, as a company, we're engaging with many governments on those kinds of conversations because of the opportunity to really use that type of technology to advance in delivery of subsidies in all the payments that the governments make, things like that. So it's happening, and plenty more to come for sure.
Thanks, Darren. I think the idea of central bank digital currencies is a webinar in itself, and I think different countries will be very different on that kind of journey at the moment. Venkat, your thoughts on either the blockchain kind of crypto issue with government, or how sustainable are these fintech solutions? Do you check
on cryptocurrency, right? Yeah. So cryptocurrency is another gray area. In fact, regulators also find it difficult to regulate, how to bring about the regulation around this. And in our country, though it's not banned, but the regulation is always cautious in terms of dealing with this. They've also discouraged banks from directly participating in this. But however, we've seen a lot of progress and the cryptocurrencies where users started using this, whether it is for gaming or for very other transactions. But I would definitely like to touch upon the usage of blockchain, for other use cases, whether it is for cross-border remittances or for various other use cases like market linkages, like we've seen in India, where the farmers are linked through blockchain for market linkages, where they can sell their produce without the middleman in place directly to the buyers. That way I think there are good number of use cases which can be explored using blockchain. Beyond that, I think there have been some talk around central bank digital currency, but the utility and the usage of such a currency is still unknown. I mean, we'll have to see, still it comes out and it gets launched. But however, there's a lot of smoke around this and a lot of ambiguity.
Thanks, Venkat. Yeah, lots of questions still to be answered, I think. Anna Maria, I'm going to come to you.
We see a lot of potential on the blockchain and the crypto technologies to simplify processes, to reduce costs and improve efficiency up to another level. We are taking in-depth analysis, especially in the cross-border and remittance solutions based on these technologies. Colombia has a lot to do with those type of areas, and so we are pretty much paying attention on what is happening and how we could embrace those technologies to better serve the population. But we are also beginning to analyze decentralized finance, especially on the capital markets. DeFi might be the next hot topic down here, especially for capital market infrastructures. And so we are taking in-depth analysis to make sure that we have a regulatory framework to deploy those type of disruptions in the market. That would be my thoughts on this topic.
Thanks, Anna Maria. And last but not least, Patricia, we came to you last on the first round. I'm going to, no pressure, give you the last word on this one. Your thoughts on Brazil's government and kind of blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and also the people that you help. Do you think they keep those fintech solutions going forward?
My word will be short. I think we're going well in blockchain. We need a regulation for crypto. I've been in Estonia a couple of, just before the pandemic started, and I was amazed to see what was happening there. And I think this is an area that we need to evolve quite a lot. And I will add just one more and go back to the 5G discussion. We need a regulation for crypto and we need advanced connectivity. And 5G became a global dispute. And I think right now everybody's losing. So we really need to advance quite quickly in both areas. And we have very good proposals from good technical bodies in Brazil, but we don't have a good and stable regulation yet.
Thanks, Patricia. It is amazing how often Estonia is mentioned as a kind of good example for other people to look at when we're having these types of discussions. I am afraid we are out of time. Just a couple of things to the audience. A questionnaire will have gone out to you. Please take a few minutes if you can to fill that in, because it means that we could give you exactly the kind of webinars that you're interested in going forward. So thank you from me in advance for doing that. And also, if you haven't looked at the articles on the Global Government Fintech website, then please do that. There's loads of great stuff, great information that's really relevant to the kind of conversations we were having today. So please take some time to do that as well if you want more information than you've had today. A massive thank you from me to the audience, sending in their questions. If we didn't manage to answer them all, we will get them answered behind the scenes after this. There will be a link with the video from this webinar, so you can watch it all again or share it with your colleagues. And there will also be a link with an article in a couple of weeks that sets out the key issues from this conversation. So again, you can use that, share that with your colleagues as well when that comes round. And I would just like to end by saying a massive thank you to our brilliant panel today. It was such a great discussion. So to Farid, to Darren, to Patricia, to Anna Maria, to Venkat, such a global expert discussion. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. To Mastercard for being the knowledge partner today. And I hope wherever you are, the rest of the world, enjoy the rest of the day. And I hope we see you again soon on another webinar very shortly. Thank you to everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.